Joshua chapter 10, 11, and 12. Now King Adonizedek of Jerusalem heard that Joshua had captured Ai and completely destroyed it, treating Ai as its king as he had Jericho and its king, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were living among them. So Adonizedek and his people were greatly alarmed, because Gibeon was a large city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were warriors. Therefore King Adonizedek of Jerusalem sent word to King Hoam of Hebron, King Piram of Jarmuth, King Japhia of Lachish, and King Debir of Eglon, saying, "Come up and help me. We will attack Gibeon, because they have made peace with Joshua and the Israelites." So the 5 Amorite kings, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces, advanced with all their armies, besieged Gibeon, and fought against it. Then the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, "Don't give up on your servants. Come quickly and save us. Help us, for all the Amorite kings living in the hill country have joined forces." Notice how all these nations joined together to fight against Israel, just like it will be in the end days. So many nations will come together and all come and rise against Israel all together. Then the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, "Don't give up on your servants. Come quickly and save us. Help us, for all the Amorite kings living in the hill country have joined forces against us." So Joshua and all his troops, including all his best soldiers, came from Gilgal. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, for I have handed them over to you. Not one of them will be able to stand against you." So Joshua caught them by surprise. After marching all night from Gilgal, the Lord threw him into confusion before Israel. He defeated them in a great slaughter of Gibeon, chased them through the ascent of Beth Horon, and struck them down as far as Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel, the Lord threw large hailstones on them from the sky along the descent of Beth Horon all the way to Azekah, and they died. More of them died from the hail than the Israelites killed with the sword. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to the Israelites, Joshua spoke to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Aijalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on its enemies. Isn't this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed its setting almost a full day. There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord listened to a man, because the Lord fought for Israel. Then Joshua and all Israel with him returned to the camp at Gilgal. Now the 5 defeated kings had fled and hidden in the cave of Makkedah. It was reported to Joshua, "The 5 kings have been found. They are hiding in the cave of Makkedah." This sounds just like in the end, when the kings will finally see Jesus coming in his wrath and run and tell the hills and the mountains to fall on them and hide them from the wrath that is to come. Now the 5 defeated kings had fled and hidden in the cave of Makkedah. It was reported to Joshua, "The 5 kings have been found. They are hiding in the cave of Makkedah." Joshua said, "Roll large stones against the mouth of the cave, and station men by it to guard the kings. But as for the rest of you, don't stay there. Pursue your enemies and attack them from behind. Don't let them enter their cities, for the Lord your God has handed them over to you." So Joshua, the Israelites, So Joshua and the Israelites finished inflicting a terrible slaughter on them until they were destroyed, although a few survivors ran away to the fortified cities. The people returned safely to Joshua in the camp at Makkedah, and no one dared to threaten the Israelites. Then Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings to me out of there." That is what they did. They brought the 5 kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon to Joshua out of the cave. When they had brought the kings to him, Joshua summoned all the men of Israel and said to the military commanders who had accompanied him, "Come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings." So the commanders came forward and put their feet on their necks. Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid or discouraged. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord will do this to all the enemies you fight." No matter what the battle is, no matter how impossible the battle looks, no matter how big the army is that will rise against us, the Lord will put them beneath our feet. After this, Joshua struck them down and executed them. He hung their bodies on 5 trees, and they were there until evening. At sunset, Joshua commanded that they be taken down from the trees and thrown into the cave where they had hidden. Then large stones were placed against the mouth of the cave, and the stones are still there today. The Lord fights for us, guys. No matter what the battle is, no matter what the trial, what the tribulation is, the battle belongs to the Lord, and He will fight for you. You are His child. On that day, Joshua captured Makkedah and struck it down with the sword, including its king. He completely destroyed it and everyone in it, leaving no survivors. So he treated the king of Makkedah as he had the king of Jericho. Joshua and all Israel with him crossed from Makkedah to Libnah and fought against Libnah. The Lord also handed it and its king over to Israel. He struck it down, putting everyone in it, the sword, and left no putting everyone in it to the sword, and left no survivors in it. He treated Libnah's king as he had the king of Jericho. From Libnah, Joshua and all Israel with him crossed to Lachish. They laid siege to it and attacked it. The Lord handed Lachish over to Israel, and Joshua captured it on the 2nd day. He struck it down, putting everyone in it to the sword, just as he had done to Libnah. At that time, King Horam of Gezer went to help Lachish, but Joshua struck him down along with his people, leaving no survivors. Then Joshua crossed from Lachish and Eglon, and all Israel with him. They laid siege to it and attacked it. On that day they captured it and struck it down, putting everyone in it to the sword. He completely destroyed it that day, just as he had done to Lachish. Next, Joshua and all Israel with him went up from Eglon to Hebron and attacked it. They captured it and struck down its king, all its villages, and everyone in it with the sword. He left no survivors, just as he had done at Eglon. He completely destroyed Hebron and everyone in it. Finally, Joshua turned toward Debir and attacked it, and all Israel was with him. He captured it, its king, and all its villages. They struck them down with the sword and completely destroyed everyone in it, leaving no survivors. He treated Debir and its king as he had treated Hebron, and as he had treated Libnah and its king. So Joshua conquered the whole region, the hill country, the Negev, the Judean foothills, and the slopes, with all their kings, leaving no survivors. He completely destroyed every living being, as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Joshua conquered everyone from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza and all the land of Goshen, as far as Gibeon. Joshua captured all these kings and their land in one campaign because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. When King Jabin of Hazor heard this news, he sent a message to King Jobab of Madon, the kings of Shimron and Achshaph, and the kings of the north in the hill country, the Arabah south of Chinnereth, the Judean foothills and the slopes of Dor to the west, the Canaanites in the east and west, the Amorites, Hethites, Perizzites, and Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites at the foot of Hermon in the land of Mizpah. They went out with all their armies, a multitude as numerous as the sand on the seashore, along with a vast number of horses and chariots. All these kings joined forces. They came and camped together at the waters of Merom to attack Israel. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, for at this time tomorrow I will cause all of them to be killed before Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." So Joshua and all his troops surprised them at the waters of Merom and attacked them. The Lord handed them over to Israel, and they struck them down, pursuing them as far as Greater Sidon and Mizrephoth-Maim, and to the east as far as the valley of Mizpeh. They struck them down, leaving no survivors. Joshua treated them as the Lord had told him. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots. At that time Joshua turned back, captured Hazor, and struck down its king with the sword, because Hazor had formerly been the leader of all these kingdoms. They struck down everyone in it with the sword, completely destroying them. He left no one alive. Then he burned Hazor. Joshua captured all these kings and their cities and struck them down with the sword. He completely destroyed them as Moses, the Lord's servant, had commanded. However, Israel did not burn any of the cities that stood on their mounds, except Hazor, which Joshua burned. The Israelites plundered all the spoils and cattle of these cities for themselves, but they struck down every person with the sword until they had annihilated them, leaving no one alive. Just as the Lord had commanded his servant Moses commanded Joshua. That is what Joshua did, leaving nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So Joshua took all this land, the hill country, all the Negev, all the land of Goshen, the foothills, the Arabah, and the hill country of Israel with its foothills, from Mount Halak, which ascends to Seir, as far as Baal Gad, in the valley of Lebanon, at the foot of Mount Hermon. He captured all their kings and struck them down, putting them to death. Joshua waged war with all these kings for a long time. No city made peace with the Israelites except the Hivites who inhabited Gibeon. All of them were taken in battle. For it was the Lord's intention to harden their hearts, so that they would engage Israel in battle, be completely destroyed without mercy, and be annihilated, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. The Lord will turn people's hearts against you, just as he did to Pharaoh against Moses, so that he could show himself, and he could be glorified through the power that he will show when he shows that he favors you and that he is on your side and that he is fighting your battle for you. For it was the Lord's intention to harden their hearts so that they would engage Israel in battle and be completely destroyed without mercy and be annihilated, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. At that time, Joshua proceeded to exterminate the Anakim from the hill country, Hebron, Debir, Anab, all the hill country of Judah and of Israel. Joshua completely destroyed them with their cities. No Anakim were left in the land of the Israelites except for some remaining in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. So Joshua took the entire land in keeping with all that the Lord had told Moses. Joshua then gave it as an inheritance to Israel, according to their tribal allotments. After this, the land had rest from war. Chapter 12. The Israelites struck down the following kings of the land, and took possession of their land beyond the Jordan, to the east, and from the Arnon River to Mount Hermon, including all the Arabah eastward. King Sihon of the Amorites lived in Heshbon. He ruled from Aroer on the rim of the Arnon River, along the middle of the valley and half of Gilead, up to the Jabbok River, the border of the Ammonites, the Arabah east of the sea of Shinnereth to the sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, eastward through Beth Jeshimith, and southward below the slopes of Pisgah. King Og of Bashan, of the remnant of the Rephaim, lived in Ashtaroth and Edrei. He ruled over Mount Hermon, Salekah, all Bashan, up to the Gesherite and Maacathite border, and half of Gilead to the border of King Sihon of Heshbon. Moses, the Lord's servant, and the Israelites struck them down, and Moses, the Lord's servant, gave their land as an inheritance to the Reubenites, Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh. Joshua and the Israelites struck down the following kings of the land beyond the Jordan to the west, from Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, which ascends toward Seir. Joshua gave their land as an inheritance to the tribes of Israel according to their allotments: the hill country, the Judean foothills, the Arabah, the slopes, the wilderness, and the Negev, the lands of the Hethites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The king of Jericho, 1. The king of Ai, which is 1, next to Bethel. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmuth, 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer, 1. The king of Debir, 1. The king of Geder, 1. The king of Harmah, 1. The king of Arad, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Makkedah, 1. The king of Bethel, 1. The king of Tappuah, 1. The king of Hepher, 1. The king of Aphek, 1. The king of Lasharon, 1. The king of Madon, the king 1. The king of Hazor, 1. The king of Shimron, Meron, 1. The king of Akshaph, 1. The king of Ta'anak, 1. The king of Megiddo, 1. The king of Kadesh, 1. The king of Jokneam in Carmel, 1. The king of Dor in Naphath Dor, 1. The king of Goyim in Gilgal, 1. The king of Tirzah, 1. The total number of all the kings, 31.